Sweden's Prime Minister asks China to cooperate with a probe to determine how 2 data cables under the Baltic Sea were damaged.
Euronews caught up with 7-time Formula One winner Lewis Hamilton ahead of this weekend's Qatar Grand Prix. Israel claimed the ceasefire with Hezbollah earlier this week was breached, as Lebanon said Israeli tanks attacked areas in the country's south, threatening a truce which had only just begun. At least 2 people were wounded by Israeli fire in southern Lebanon, according to state media. Israeli officials said in a statement that suspects had arrived to several areas in southern Lebanon, breaching the ceasefire terms. They said the IDF opened fire towards them and would actively enforce violations of the ceasefire agreement. A long-negotiated ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah took effect on Wednesday, intending to allow people from both sides of the conflict to return home after 14 months of fighting. The agreement comprises an initial 2-month ceasefire during which Hezbollah would withdraw north and Israeli forces return to their side of the border. Lebanese troops and UN peacekeepers would then patrol the buffer zone. Russian President Vladimir Putin threatened to strike Ukrainian capital Kiev with recently unveiled Oreshnik missiles, as he praised US President-elect Donald Trump as quite clever and experienced. He made the comments during a news conference on the sidelines of a security summit alliance of former Soviet nations in Kazakhstan.
Но по значительным целям будем применять те средства, которые есть в нашем распоряжении, в том числе, я об этом тоже сказал, не исключаем и использование орешника по военным, по объектам военной промышленности, либо по центрам принятия решения, и в Киеве в том числе.
While at the summit, Russia's leader also praised incoming US President Donald Trump.
Возможна версия, что действующая администрация хочет создать для будущей дополнительные сложности. Такое тоже возможно. Но насколько я себе представляю, вновь избранного президента, он все-таки человек умный и достаточно уже опытный.
Moscow has launched intensifying attacks against Ukraine's energy infrastructure recently, with Trump's victory casting uncertainty over the future of Ukraine.
Winter conditions get harsher for Ukrainians as Russia intensifies attacks on the country's energy infrastructure. Early Thursday morning, scores of missiles and drones launched across the entire country, targeting the energy grid and leaving more than 1 million Ukrainians without electricity. Ukrainian Air Defense reported that 176 missiles and drones out of 188 have been intercepted. Russian President Vladimir Putin said that the attacks were a response to Ukraine's attacks with UK and US weapons last week. However, Moscow has been targeting the energy grid every winter since the invasion began. Over 280,000 households in the northwestern Rivne region were without electricity because of the attack. There were also interruptions to water supplies in affected areas. One of the strikes in the Odessa region killed 2 and injured 3, including a 16-year-old boy.
Просто стеклами завалило. У дитя ранение, зашили ногу пока. Но у нас нету ни в одной комнате, нигде ни одного окна, нету дверей внутри. У нас везде вылетели окна. У нас шоковое состояние. Мы остались на зиму, считайте, в одной коробке. Все, ни окон, ни дверей, нигде нет.
Also in the Volvin region, 215,000 households lost electricity. All critical infrastructure that lost power has been switched to generators.
Thousands of Georgians have protested outside the parliament in Tbilisi after Prime Minister Irakli Kabakidze announced a suspension in the country's EU accession bid. There were clashes between police and protesters, with officers using water cannons and deploying right teams to quell the unrest. Kobakidze's decision to stop accession talks until 2028 came just hours after the European Parliament adopted a resolution rejecting the country's election results, citing major irregularities. But the people of Georgia are determined to continue making their voices heard until their demands are met.
They're going against Georgian people's will and they want to drag us back to USSR, but that will never happen because Georgian people will never let this happen.
The European Parliament said the country should rerun its election under international supervision within a year. The bloc also announced a cut in budgetary support to Georgia, a measure lawmakers say could be detrimental to the country.
They will not receive any funding from EU, which means that they will block 100 million devoted to Georgian civil society and media. They're going to suffocate whatever pockets of freedom are left in this country.
Kobakidze accuses Brussels of blackmail and says his government will work to implement the necessary reforms to resume accession talks. He said that by 2028, Georgia will be the most prepared country among all candidates to join the bloc in the year 2030.
Sweden has formally asked China to cooperate with an investigation into the suspected sabotage of 2 data cables running under the Baltic Sea. The fibre optic cables, one running from Finland to Germany and the other from Lithuania to Sweden, were damaged last week in an area where the Chinese bulk carrier Yipeng-3 had been seen.
With this request, we obviously think it's extremely important to find out exactly what had happened, and of course we expect also China to comply with the request we have sent to China.
The Yipeng-3 is currently anchored in international waters between Sweden and Denmark, where it's being monitored by several vessels, including those belonging to the Danish Navy. The Wall Street Journal reported that investigators suspect the Yipeng-3 of deliberately severing the fibre optic cables by dragging its anchor along the seabed. Authorities in Beijing said they had no information about the ship and denied any responsibility.
中方对于处理此类的事故一直是秉持合作的态度。目前我们同相关方的沟通协调工作正在推进中。
Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk said this wasn't the first time suspected sabotage had happened in the Baltic Sea. The Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines, which carried gas from Russia to Germany, were both damaged in explosions in 2022. And in 2023, the Baltic connector gas pipeline between Finland and Estonia was seriously damaged. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has said the government will overhaul the immigration system after new data showed arrivals to the country had hit a record high. Figures released by the Office for National Statistics put net migration at more than 900,000 in the year to June 2023. Starmer blamed those numbers on the previous Conservative government.
Because a failure on this scale isn't just bad luck. It isn't a global trend or taking your eye off the ball. No, this is a different order of failure. This happened by design, not accident. Policies were reformed deliberately to liberalise immigration. Brexit was used for that purpose, to turn Britain into a one-nation experiment in open borders.
Starmer said his government plans to overhaul the points-based immigration system brought in by the Conservatives in 2021 after Brexit. That system gives applicants points for specific skills and qualifications, and those who don't meet the threshold aren't granted a visa. Immigration is a divisive topic in the UK, with many voters concerned about the strain on public services caused by a large influx of people. But some sectors, including healthcare, argue they'd be unable to function without staff brought in from abroad.
Portugal's government announced plans to invest €20 million in 600 new vehicles for the country's police force and National Guard. Portugal's Prime Minister said the extra investment was necessary and stated that he wanted to value the careers of public administration employees, especially security forces. However, Portugal's National Police Union said the investment was insufficient and below requirements. The union president said some Portuguese police equipment is in varying states of decay, and without investment, the police grind to a halt. Lewis Hamilton holds the record for the most career Formula One race wins and is widely considered the greatest driver in motorsport history. The British driver shocked the racing world when he said he would suit up for Ferrari in 2025, calling it one of the hardest decisions he's ever had to make. Euronews caught up with Hamilton before his last race with Mercedes.
Formula One revs up this weekend for the 2024 Qatar Grand Prix. 20 of the world's best drivers will line up on the starting grid at the newly upgraded Lusail International Circuit. All eyes will be on Lewis Hamilton as he heads into his final lap with Mercedes, trading in his silver arrows for the iconic red of Ferrari.
I think some of the biggest hurdles are probably second-guessing yourself, having doubts of whether or not you can do something when things get tough. So self-belief, I think, has been one of the most important things for me, is continue to have self-belief.
This is beautiful. Wow.
Hamilton also recently fulfilled one of his childhood dreams. He landed in the cockpit of a high-performance training jet, where he participated in flight training for astronauts.
Hamilton will wear a unique race suit featuring patches that say Space Mission and is starting number 44 this weekend at the Lusail International Circuit.